I'm squealing.
Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, July 9th, 2018 Muscatine Community School District Board of Education meeting. Madam Secretary, would you be willing to take roll and help us determine a quorum, please?
Sure. Director Bauer?
Here.
DeVete?
Here.
Drava?
Here.
Finn?
Here.
Mather?
Here.
McCarter? Wildermuth?
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. If you would all join me, we'll recite the pledge together. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome all of our visitors and our media representatives. Thank you for being here this evening. The next item on our agenda is our Citizen Speaks portion of the agenda. This is an opportunity where if there's anyone in the audience that would like to address the board, you are now invited to do so. We recommend that you hold your comments to 3 minutes and to be sure and state your name and address. As per our board policy, we are not able to respond to your comments, but board members are always available outside of board meetings as well, that you can certainly talk to them one-on-one. Nobody's going to the podium. All right, so we'll keep going. We're almost halfway done with our agenda already. Next on our agenda is the board, for the board to review board targets and our goals report. And we have lots of great things this evening. And Jerry, I'm going to pass it to you to kick us off.
Great, thank you. And to get things started, and Director DeVete, if I could borrow your calendar. The board has at their seat a magnetic calendar, and we are really excited about this. And Becky, if you'd like to maybe step up and share a little bit about why we have these and how we're going to be distributing these.
So, Muskie Welcome Visits, that's what this is all about. So you have a complimentary one at your seat so you can take a look at it. So what is it? A Muskie visit is a 10-minute visit where the teacher introduces themselves and welcomes the student and the family to MCSD. You're probably wondering, why are we doing Muskie Welcome Visits? Well, the purpose is to establish and build rapport with our families. It will take place prior to the first day of school. It includes all elementary buildings, pre-K through 5th, along with our 6th graders and our 9th graders, and it provides an opportunity to build positive connections between home and school. And it also establishes a great start to the 2018-19 school year. So all families during their Muskie visit will receive a complimentary Muskie magnet. And you're probably wondering, well, how did this all begin? Well, the process actually began with 2 elementary schools last year that conducted home visits last fall. And the feedback was so positive that teachers were wanting to continue this and actually build it district-wide. So buildings were able to collaborate with one another and devise what their schedule looked like and what their welcome visit will look like. So we're really excited because this is something that is led by teachers, and we were just able to watch it grow. So we're really super excited for Muskie visits.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, the prospect of teachers going to a student's home, making that introduction and making that contact is a really powerful way to send the message that we care. And Mike and Becky have spent a lot of time working on the details with this. The teacher advisory group was really, as Becky said, really important part of that, and we are really excited about that. So tonight I wanted to share some enrollment trends that we've been talking about a little bit, and we're going to revisit those. And then we have a little bit of additional information. And I apologize for the small print or for aging eyes. Whatever best fits your situation in life, I will go there. We have been talking for some time about the issue that the district is going to have fewer students. And so from 2013 to 2014 to the 2021-22 school year, our calculations and the calculations of the Department of Education would show that we'll have a reduction of 699 students. And that represents over $4.5 million worth of funding. And we have talked about this in the past, and the thing that the next slide that really hits home with that is our elementary enrollment. So when you look at that same period of time, of that 669 students, 554 of those are in the elementary, which goes back to the problem of number of births in the county and in the district. So that reduction of those students just at the elementary level is over $3.5 million. So, you know, it is something that we have been planning for, something that we are in a good position to weather this. But again, it's one of those things we have to keep in our forefront of our minds. Now that next slide, and I think this is important for us to get a grip on. You see the projected enrollments for next year at the elementaries. And our largest would be Jefferson at 426 and McKinley at 407. And then you see the others are less than that, significantly less than that in some cases. What we've also given on this slide is when you're looking at kindergarten, first and second grade average class sizes. Typically, you know, you would like to have probably under somewhere around maybe 24 kids in a class. We have some that are going to be significantly less than that. Now, next year, because we are in a position of financially that we have prepared ourselves, we're going to be able to weather these kinds of numbers next year. And we could weather them probably for a while, but at some point, as you can see with losing that kind of funding, we would not be able to sustain those kind of numbers. Probably the most efficient building on that grouping is McKinley, but that's, again, we have put additional students in that building. So if you look at the next slide, we looked at 3rd through 5th grade, and you know, we have a bubble class in the 5th grade of 391, and then as you can see, those numbers go down both in the 4th and the 3rd. And again, you have class sizes that are relatively low, which is not a bad thing. The problem is being able to sustain those kind of numbers. So what is the next steps with this? We've talked about a number of things, and we've had conversation inside and outside of board meetings about these kind of what's next. I have had some conversation at the University of Northern Iowa about them helping us with a study to look at what are some what are some positives, some negatives, some pluses and minuses of looking at different grade configurations. We've talked about having 6th grade being retained in the elementary buildings. And I think this is something that you and I could help us with, taking a look at that, see what the impacts of that would be. We've also talked about having a single-site early childhood center. And again, I think that's one of those things. It would be nice to have another set of eyes look at this, another set of experiences look at this, and be able to give the board some recommendations about ways of addressing that, or if it should be addressed. We have really worked hard to make sure that declining enrollment does not mean declining quality. And I had a long conversation today with a patron who was concerned that we should never ever close a building. And I said, well, I wish I could make that promise that we never ever would have to make some of those changes. But the reality of it is you have fixed costs. And with declining enrollment, you have to manage your fixed cost, or the only other thing you can do is reduce services and programs. I really feel that this district is in a position that we should be able to manage our fixed costs and not only not have to reduce services or programs, but we should be able to enhance our services if we do this right. The reason the district's in good position now to handle this enrollment decline is because we have made some changes with a couple of buildings. And during that time, and I say this to compliment the team that we have in this district working on these things, we've had declining enrollment, and we've enhanced services just about in every area. And in just a minute, Mike's going to give you an update on what we're doing with some renovating in some of our buildings and improving the physical plants in those buildings. So we are in no way, shape, or form a declining district. We have, like most districts in the state of Iowa, we don't have as many kids coming in as we used to. And so what will happen in the next, before the next meeting, I should have an opportunity to sit down with the UNI administration, and they have been very excited about the prospect of this, and take a look at what that study could look like and when that could be brought to the board. We will continue to look at different options for us. We are set to go for the school year. We don't have any significant changes going into next school year, and we're going to be in good financial shape. Tom continues to tell me we're in good financial shape, so step off the ledge. It's okay. It's all fine. Do you have any questions on those numbers or any of that data? You know, as you can see, when you look at those average class sizes, if we were to do nothing, they would get really small.
Yeah. Well, I know we did a study 3 years ago, and unfortunately, it's tracking.
Yes.
It is. I would have given anything for it not to be so.
I know we had a little skepticism on whether or not that live birth number really fit the community, but it sure is tracking it, so
Yeah.
it's kind of scary.
You know, and we've talked about, you know, being in a position to do some things over the next decade is really going to be important, because we also have aging buildings, and we're going to, over the next decade, we want to make sure the board has the capacity to call it position with regretting, I wish we wouldn't have closed that building, or, you know, I think we have some ways we can do this that will allow the district to have some flexibility, and at the same time probably be able to address some of these numbers issues. But again, I think that's where it will be helpful to have you and I come in and help with that. They will ask questions that we haven't thought of just because they don't live it every day.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, you know, as I said, we are not a declining district. We have a lot of exciting things going on. Mike's going to share where we're at with some of those things. We are really moving forward on some things. Our buildings are coming together, and they're going to look great for the beginning of the school year. And Mike, I'm going to hand the clicker over.
Great.
So.
Thanks. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, as Dr. Reby indicated, we've got many exciting upgrades and changes taking place throughout the district this summer. Many of the changes occurring this summer were spearheaded by our District Advisory Committee, which is composed of teachers from all district levels. The District Advisory Committee, in conjunction with students, developed and promoted the concept of doing things the Muskie way. In that, in order to get each of our schools to embrace the concept, they truly believe that our schools must become united as Muskies. So kind of in hopes of uniting all of our schools as Muskies, the District Advisory Committee recommended that our schools assume the Muskie name and adopt the Muskie colors. So some of the district summer branding that you're going to see here shortly, and the painting and furniture upgrades, will kind of ensure that all of our buildings become united as Muskies. So I'm going to start with just giving a brief overview of furniture that's taking place, painting, and branding. So this summer, we have furniture, and it's already started at Franklin and Madison, and we'll go on to also Colorado. Those are the 3 buildings we're doing this summer. Installation for the furniture should be all completed, as you can see, by about July 24th. One of the things that we have done along with the furniture implementation is painting. And one of the things we're able to do this summer, and actually we started in the fall, last fall, and probably why we've been able to get so much done, is also painting of the buildings as well. And we're basically completed at Franklin, Madison, Colorado, I would say, close in Mulberry. Grant's kind of in progress, and then McKinley's in progress. We decided to go ahead and paint some of the buildings that weren't getting furniture because we were doing branding in those buildings as well, and we could get the color scheme in place before we actually brought the furniture in. So that leads to the next topic as far as branding. Branding is going to go out throughout all of our buildings at West Middle School through all our elementary buildings this summer, and they'll all be completed in July. And Franklin is completed already. And then also some additional things that will be happening this summer will be blinds. All the schools that are getting furniture upgrades will get new blinds. I don't know if you've never noticed in some of our buildings, they're originals, they're really poor shape. So West Middle School and then our elementary schools will be getting new blinds that are getting new furniture. Also mats are going in, rugs, and they will be arriving, as you can see, in July 18th and be completed by the end of July. You'll get, I have some pictures that you'll be able to see of those, but they will obviously add to the Muskie logo and so forth as well. Some other things I wanted to draw the attention to the board that is going on this summer too is the new lockers being installed at West Middle School and the painting of those new lockers, transition to purple and gold classroom indicator signs and hallway signs at West Middle School as well. And that all those things should be completed by the end of July as well. So when registration comes, all these projects should be completed. So I thought it would be helpful to maybe see what the furniture kind of concept looked like. Thanks, Scott. So you can kind of see a 360 view of what the furniture is going to look like. It's a flexible. It was endorsed by some of our research people, but also by teachers, had a lot of choice. As you can see, there's some soft seating furniture. There's a learning rug in a lot of rooms as well, elementary rooms. A lot of portable furniture. They'll be able to do a lot of group work. So they'll have a lot of flexibility in their classrooms. And then you can kind of also see the color scheme is similar to probably the middle schools as far as infusing that musky color into the classrooms at the elementary level as well. So I think the teachers are really excited. Like I said, that all should be completed probably in the next 2 weeks. So Colorado, Madison, and Franklin should all be completed. So might have to. Thanks, Scott. Probably don't want to see the.
Probably don't want to see.
Thanks. So one of the other things I just want to touch on briefly is kind of our process of removing furniture. Last year, I think there was some questions, was that the process that we wanted to use? So we really looked at that this year. We really made a point of first relocating some furniture in the elementaries that we're replacing, moving those to potentially other elementaries. We also contacted 17 local businesses, ranging, as you can see, from schools to MCA, library, and so forth, to see if they had a need. Then we also allowed some non-local schools to come in and walk through, and then the public was also invited. So I think this year we probably did a better job of making sure that a lot of the furniture went locally as much as we possibly could. And I think the removal process went very well and very smooth for us this year. The next is it gives you some examples of the painting that's going on throughout all of our elementary buildings at West. You can kind of see, it's a little bit hard, but the purple, they try to accent a lot of areas with purple and gold throughout the buildings. I will say our painters are doing a tremendous job. They've just done an outstanding job with it. You can see some gold here. So a lot of different areas for accents. The musky colors were infused. A look at some of the branding. I thought this one was kind of cool. It's at Franklin. It's the steps at Franklin. Mm-hmm. But you'll see a lot of this type of branding throughout all our elementaries. Again, all our elementaries will get the branding, even the ones that aren't getting new furniture. The schools were allowed to also pick out some sayings that they wanted throughout the building so they could personalize what their buildings, some of their sayings. What goes along with that too is, that's an example of a saying. There's also will be some M's, either on the floors or they will also be in the gym areas. Again, elementary schools had kind of choice where they thought it would look best and work best. Then also the matting. There'll be mats throughout the gyms, areas in all of our buildings, the home of the Muskies and so forth. And then you'll see some things like this, the Franklin Muskies and so forth throughout the buildings. Each of the buildings will have so many of those. And there's another saying there. And then the new mats. Each school had a choice. They could choose between one of these 3 mats throughout their buildings. We tried to really focus on high traffic areas because they are kind of expensive. And they could pick whichever ones they wanted from that. So that's kind of a quick overview, and there's a few other things I just wanted to make the board aware that wasn't in this, is that there's also work being done at Franklin. They blacktopped behind Franklin School, and that will now become the staff parking lot. And what will be nice about that is they really have been frustrated with their drop-off area, and that will alleviate the drop-off kind of conflict of cars and so forth. So we're excited about that. Colorado Schools is having a major upgrade as well, like in their gym, a lot of tiling in the classrooms. It's looking great. And then also I thought the board might be interested in the new PE complex that's still scheduled to be open, finished and open hopefully by mid-September. So that's what they're projecting right now. So I'll open it up. Any questions that the board might have?
Mike, do we have a price tag on the total branding effort?
Price tag on just the branding?
Right.
I could get that for you. Elena, do you? I'm sorry? 87,000.
Thank you.
Yep. Right.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
Next on our agenda, under action and possible action items, the following items are considered to be routine by the Board of Education and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless the director so requests, in which event the items will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence from the agenda. Those items are minutes, employment recommendations, bills and claims, and the Muscatine Preschool Alliance contracts.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And the consent agenda carries. That takes us to our next item is the approval for request for proposal for architectural services for the MHS Science Project Action. And Jerry, I think you might have some introductions for us.
Well, actually, I'm going to let Mike take this. He's been working with Stanley on this, and we'll be able to walk us through how we got to the point we are tonight.
Thank you, President Drawball. Tonight, Stanley's going to share out with the board their recommended design option as well as the recommended location of the new science labs. Following their presentation, Dr. Reby and Tom will share with you the district proposal to finance the labs. But I thought I first would kind of begin with the presentation providing an overview of the project. So you can kind of see, and I know it's a little bit hard to see up there, but you should have in front of you as well, so sorry about that. The issue really, and I think you recognize this, is our present lab sizes really, they're just simply inadequate to support our current and future science and STEM curriculums. So what it really becomes is the challenge of this project is how to develop labs that will address the current shortcomings and enable the labs to have the flexibility to accommodate future curriculum needs, and also prepare students for science, which is really difficult, science and STEM opportunities which have not even been created yet. So these options you're going to see this evening will encourage and accommodate that growth in STEM and science curriculums, hopefully over the next 15 years. The options we considered, there basically is 3 different options. We looked at renovation of the existing science labs as one option. Second option was renovation of the second floor area formerly known as the Social Studies and Language Arts Wing was the second option. And then our third option was construction of a freestanding building on the high school grounds. So those are really the 3 viable options that were identified. The process and factors that Stanley used to kind of determine the recommended design option and location of the labs were as follows. First, they took into consideration the feasibility of the cost feasibility of the project, as well as the impact it has on your school operations during the construction time. The program, they also looked at that the program need was at least 10 classrooms of 1,000 to 1,600 square feet. They also looked at site visits to laboratories and local Muscatine facilities to ensure our science labs are kind of incorporating the latest trends in the industry. They created a design which will support growth in STEM and science curriculum. They also did a review of the current research and literature on science labs and gathered ideas and incorporated those latest trends. They did site visits to other schools where new science labs just occurred and also got ideas from there. And then most importantly, they enlisted the feedback from our science teachers in the selection of the recommended option. And following kind of Stanley's presentation, the board will have an opportunity to not only ask our Stanley presenters questions, but also graciously some of our science teachers have joined us tonight, and I know they'd be open to questions as well. So you'd have that opportunity. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa Narzu from Stanley's, and they'll kind of share out their findings and recommendations.
Mike, could I ask you one question?
Yep,
How
sure.
many labs do we have today, and what average size are they?
They're going to go over
Oh,
all
they're
that
gonna
when
go
they
there, okay.
when they show that. Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Good evening, I'm Melissa Tiedemann with Stanley Consultants. So we'll start off, this was our first option we looked at, and this was a new structure. It would be adjacent to the rear side of the high school, be like I said, a new construction, a standalone. You can see the cost there at the bottom, a little bit over $19 million. You know, and that all of that contributes to, you know, new utilities, relocating the existing utilities that may be underground there right now. The higher costs are also incorporated with the larger space needed for circulation, so additional hallway space, restroom facilities, everything that would go into a standalone facility.
Can I ask why this one, it seems awfully expensive, almost $20 million for a building. I know this is not your recommended option, but I mean, that's more than, well, close to twice the price we paid for Jefferson. We just are putting up that PE building, which, I mean, I wouldn't say only a few $1 million in most contexts, but it seems like this, is that roughly the same size or is it comparable? I mean, what makes this thing so expensive?
Well, right now, because there's so many unknowns, we just pretty much went with a footprint and then added some contingencies. So these aren't necessarily constructed costs. We have contingencies built into these to account for those design additions that will come as we lay out the floor plan. That just was pretty much the next step, would be the floor plan and laying out the finishes and that kind of stuff. So we wanted to be conservative so that we were essentially comparing apples to apples. All of the options have that contingency to account for those undeveloped costs.
That's almost $1,000 a square foot.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Also, this would be, we were considering a science lab facility, so that really makes it.
Is there something about lab facilities
Yes.
themselves? What specifically is it that drives the cost there?
Definitely the equipment that goes in,
Okay.
cabinets, there
Sure.
would be special HVAC systems, and
But those are gonna be the case in any of these options, wouldn't that be correct?
that is correct.
Okay.
So I mean, really be the difference would be the structural cost.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there would be space, there'd be daylight between the high school building and this building in your estimation, or would it be adjoined to the high school structure?
We looked at a couple different ways. The one we're looking at, we just laid a footprint on the area that we thought was available. It is adjoining. We didn't
Okay.
leave any space, but then there's a loading dock and there's a lot of utilities that would need relocated. So we didn't look at all of those things, but it would be adjoining.
Okay, thank you.
On the other schools that you spoke with that have new science labs, what was their cost per square foot? Did you have one that was a standalone building, and do you know the cost per square foot?
What was Waukees? I mean, it wasn't anywhere near that, I know that. Did you talk to Waukee?
Yeah, we did, but we didn't, I don't know that they gave us costs.
Okay. I know the STEM facility up by Kirkwood was
Just should give us
5 million.
a reasonable
So I'm
estimate
really
of
surprised at the cost.
cost per square foot. Okay.
It was like $250 a square foot.
So this was option 2. This was taking the existing science lab area, and you can kind of see, we took the existing layout and overlaid the new lab layout over the top, so you could see what the existing size of the labs were, roughly in the 900 square foot range, which really doesn't meet current standards for lab facilities. You can see here that we were only able, in this given space, to accomplish 7 new lab spaces. Again, the constraints are that science area. There's no natural light, and less flexibility. These areas would be pretty much fixed to whatever, I guess, classroom setup it would be. In the later options, you can see where we have maybe a lecture/lab area where there's a little bit more flexibility in the spaces. In the second option, using the existing science lab, you're also looking at the disruption or displacement of the science labs during construction. And that would be an added encumbrance on the high school to try to find a space for these facilities or these classrooms to take place during construction. Option 3, you can see is a little bit larger. We're still on the first floor, but it's a little bit larger in square footage than option 2, and that's because we've, in addition to the existing science areas, we've also gone ahead and recaptured some of the areas outside of the existing science area, some existing classroom areas and some, I believe these are some office spaces also. So still, we're without natural light because we're still on the first floor with no windows. Still only able to accomplish 8 labs within this area. And you're still looking at the displacement of all of these classrooms during construction. And then the cost is shown there at 8.6 million. Again, has all the contingencies in there, the extras, so this won't necessarily, this is a moving number once the finishes and layout have been identified.
Can I ask a question? For this option, the mic is really high here, but anyway, I'll try to stay away from that. The displacement during construction, can you tell us how many months? What would you guys of that?
The displacement of the rooms?
Yes.
For that? Yeah. I think when we looked at that, you would focus obviously on the summer and try to tie it around your summer months, because there'd be huge displacement if you remodel in the current area. So it would probably impact your schedule of when you're doing your remodeling more so than if you can do it in an area where it doesn't cause that type of displacement.
But you'd still probably be looking at a couple months of a school year at least.
Oh, yeah.
If you took your entire summer and really pushed your contractor.
Last couple of months.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So then we looked at the second floor to see if we had room there to lay out the new labs. And we're looking at the former language arts social studies area. And like you can see, that's our recommended option. We've laid out 6 labs that are 1350 square feet, and then 2 larger labs that are 1620 square feet, and each lab has access to prep and storage with the exception of the ones in the corners at the bottom. The advantage is most of the labs and lecture spaces have access to natural light. We would have windows. There's 2 additional lecture spaces here that would be shared by the smaller labs, and they would be available for use when they were not being used by the labs. We felt like this was the best use of space in terms of how the lab storage and lecture rooms were organized, which is one of the reasons this was the recommended option. We've got a good square footage available upstairs, similar to what we were looking at in the previous option. Cost is a little higher, but overall, this option seems to be the better arrangement of spaces, and also preferred by the science department when we presented it to them. Again, when we were talking about disruption, this would be, I wouldn't say no disruption, but there would be less disruption to the existing science labs downstairs when construction would happen on the second floor.
And where would the existing classes go? I mean, I know they wouldn't necessarily be displaced during the year, but where are we going to relocate those classrooms?
Sure. Originally, this was originally the plan where to put the science labs after the new wing was built, and so there wasn't a designation of how the old language arts and social studies rooms were going to be used. And what they're used for right now are your at-risk programming and special ed, and also some foreign language. Many of those rooms, because of changes in programming for at-risk, have been moved already out of that area. There's a feeling that we could move to other classrooms throughout the building, that there'd be enough available spaces throughout the building to move those. So this would certainly be the least disruptive as far as trying to find rooms, but also the ability to probably section it off where you could still function as a school. It wouldn't be as disruptive.
So if we look at option 4, which is the option that you just talked about, so we talk about like perhaps maybe what I would call perhaps the advantages or the good points about this option, but if we decided to go with this option, what are we giving up here? Give me some of the disadvantages for an option like that, for having science labs on second floor or.
Well, that's a good question. One of the things that I immediately thought of is like venting and those kind of things. Well, that's one of the things that well, you're closer to the roof. Actually, it's going to be easier to vent out that way. I don't know if there's a lot of disadvantages. One of the things that intrigued me about this recommendation is that I think we could really make this a real kind of a showplace of science, which would make for a great marketing tool. And so I think that was because of the space really would be really renovated into this the science area. I think there's some good things that could happen there. Obviously, the old science rooms we would probably gut and turn into regular classrooms, and so we would gain that space back. But That might be a good question for any of our science staff. Can you think of any disadvantages to having it on the second floor?
What about the ability to get projects that are bigger than the doorways and the hallways up there to work on? I see utility issues being a concern upstairs because there's the adequate water and hot water and so forth to support a science lab. It just seems like it'd be very expensive. And if you had a project bigger than, I mean, I know this isn't to scale because there's no doorways and so forth of how to get into these rooms. But you know, if you bring in some life-size projects, how are you going to get them there?
So when we were laying these spaces out, we tried to keep the hallways as what we saw were in the labs downstairs and upstairs. I purposely did not put any doorways in there because then it becomes a floor plan and it's not just a concept. But we've put some thought into how you would enter, and there's definitely 8 feet wide corridors that we recommend for a science building. Definitely we have higher ceilings in this floor than we have downstairs right now, and again, comparing to a proposal that compares to the existing science labs, we've got way larger spaces up here. And I don't know if we need larger than 8 feet. Indoors would...
Well, I'm not so worried about that area, but how do you get up there?
Yeah.
I mean, look at the hallways to get there to begin with. You don't have that to get upstairs. What's that?
Yeah.
Well, but even larger than the elevator. I mean, is the elevator big enough?
And
I don't know.
do we run any kind of ADA requirement? I mean, is that elevator adequate for a facility that size?
We don't know that. We didn't look at that.
I mean, I would tend to think that it's not.
Well, the second floor still is currently being used as classroom, so I don't know if
So
there'd be any
it's-
different
yeah.
use
It'd be
than what
more
it's
the-
coded for now. It's just, you know,
Equipment and so forth.
yeah.
Okay, Tim, you're thinking more of like a freight elevator
Yes.
to get stuff up there.
Mm-hmm.
How many, have we talked to any schools that have their science labs on the second floor? We could just ask.
I mean, I'm trying to compare it to what I saw at Waukee and what I saw at the STEM lab up at Kirkwood, and I'm just not getting it to the vision of what's been presented at those locations, which was a lot of research done to get to that point. Did you talk to Christine Bullock or Sarah Derry or any of those individuals? Good.
And that's why we kept the two larger facilities or the two larger labs. We have them called chemistry lab now, but that was kind of the space requirement that they looked at for the STEM being the size that a STEM lab required. So that's why we did propose the two. It was I guess the feeling of the direction we were given to try to maximize the space to get as many classroom/lab facilities in the space that was given to us, and so
All right.
that's why.
The STEM labs, I've built in some other schools STEM labs, and what the concept oftentimes is projects. You're looking at projects where the rooms are large enough. The STEM labs oftentimes they're leaving their projects there when they're completing the work through the projects. The Waukee is beautiful. I think the one downside of that facility is the labs are spread out throughout the building. They aren't in a consolidated area, and that was something that was very important to our teachers. They wanted it in a consolidated area. This also provides this design. With labs, you can go kind of one of two ways. You can go to a centralized system where you have lecture rooms and then you have labs that are separate, or you can have the lab and the lecture room together. And it was definitely the preference of our science teachers, which was probably the norm of most of the new construction and science labs, is to have them together. The other thing that was very important to them was to have storage that was connected to the classrooms. So this design also gives storage connection to every classroom. That is, as you know, in science is a huge thing as well. So
I know that one of the reasons they separated those out is so you had ability for math to use them, sciences and
Right.
the other curriculum, other coursework to be able to utilize those
Right.
slabs, which is what STEM is all about. It's not,
Exactly.
it's just not science.
Yep.
It's the industrial tech, it's
Right.
the ag, it's all that pulled together. And so that was the intention
Yes.
for that to be separated out. So
Yeah.
I don't like to see when STEM is all tied around science.
Right.
That's not the intent.
Right, it's not the intent, you're right. I think the hope would be is to having other STEM labs throughout the building
Right.
as well, yep. The one that's a natural fit, like you said, Tim, is math or industrial tech would be another natural fit as well.
I'll just second Tim's thought. I mean, if you have to use it for other things, do you have enough space to get projects up or down? If you gotta get a project onto the ground, right, how do you get it down to the ground? And go outside or whatever it might need to be, so just make sure.
Yeah. And I think when the RFP for design of I think they can look at that very closely to make sure that,
Yeah, and
we address that.
maybe even a
Yeah.
larger freight elevator is
Right.
appropriate or something, right? But just make sure
Use
you're
the
not locked
solution.
in by something that is,
Right.
yeah,
then hinders you later. The other question I had is, we spent the first part of the meeting talking about declining enrollment. We said we have a 10 lab need. Is that a 10 lab need now? Is that a 10 lab need 5 years from now?
right.
How did
Yeah.
we plan, how did we look at that?
I think that's a good question is we looked at, much like what you saw at the beginning, projected enrollment, our current enrollment and projected enrollment, and we thought 10 was the right spot to be for the future as well.
How many kids can be instructed in one of these labs at a time, roughly?
Well, there's regulations that are recommendations of how many students, and I think it's 20, is it 24? Yeah,
It's gonna say
24.
24 or
Yeah,
25.
yep, 24 is kind of the recommendation.
I think it's important. I mean, I want to make sure everybody understands STEM labs are very important to me, but I want to make sure we're doing them right. I just have some concerns based upon some other experiences in other areas I've seen, so.
Well, and I
You could
think-
not bring industrial tech equipment up here and utilize that in a STEM lab.
Well, and I think the other thing that we need to probably understand too is that we are going to at some point want to do some renovation in the industrial tech area.
Right.
You know, one of the things that seems to be really important in the STEM area is that you have space and you have flexibility, because that changes and you need, it's a very project-based environment. That environment may not be best in a more academic wing. It may be better in a different area. So I think, you know, and it somewhat depends on the STEM activity.
Right.
There are some that would be really appropriate in you know, in a physics lab. There's some much more appropriate in a industrial tech lab.
Well, and that's what kind of surprised me on this, the cost, because for the most part, an open room is what you need, with just access to utilities as needed, which are on recoils and so forth, versus fixed
The
equipment.
big cost
Flexible.
on labs is always the cabinets and fixtures. I mean, that just is what drives up cost on these things. It makes, a science room is always probably the most expensive construction in a school, especially in a high school. I would also say that these are extremely conservative numbers, and my expectation would be that this probably will not cost that estimate. And I think that's the other thing that we haven't talked about is, you know, I think there will be some interest in some private dollars also involved in this. I think that the key for moving to the next step is if we can come to some decision on which of these options would be what we would want to include in RFP to get more detail. Because from that, it would go then to, obviously, the bidding process and that.
I'm not sure I heard, how many rooms do we have today and what are their average square feet? I didn't see that. Was that?
The average square feet is
Yeah.
About
that.
900
900.
square feet.
900?
And I think, I'm not sure if all of them are science downstairs. There's a couple math, but there's 9. I think we counted 9.
Okay. So we have 9 at 900 or so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In one of the downsides is many of them aren't really labs either. They're more classrooms. Yeah, yeah.
But they're sort of interconnected too. There's 6 of them. It's kind of laid underneath. If you look at it, you have to go through one lab to go into the other. So.
Well, and whatever we end up putting on that first floor, based on the way it's built, will not have access to natural light. I mean, it's a wonderful thing to have, and it's important, but just based on the sheer design of the first floor, whoever's in there is not going to have access to natural light.
Somebody's going to lose on
Right.
light.
Right.
You're going to have a classroom without light no matter where.
Right.
So-
Not that I think it should be science, but I mean, somebody will have it. I am not an expert at reading these maps, and I appreciate some of the color coding because that helps me. But one of the questions I have on page 8, when we look at the second floor, it references that there's 15,500 square feet. When it goes to then the option 4, it increases by 200 square feet.
Right, and if you look closer, we're trying to recapture some of the hallway area. That's how we got that. We're leaving 8 feet, so there would still be adequate circulation.
edge.
On the top there.
So the hallway's even narrower.
Got it. In the pink.
Yeah, it sticks out.
Okay. Not that 200 square feet is necessarily a big deal, but I was trying to figure out how we made the building bigger. That's what I was thinking.
And
so.
definitely, we've still got lockers in that hallway that could potentially go away, but we didn't mess with that right now.
Okay.
And we potentially could have more room. We could have these bigger, but then we have to account for walls and there's other things that are in there.
I do have one more question regarding option 4, second floor versus first floor in terms of safety. And safety will be definitely a major concern for me. Any idea? You know, again, I would say like Tammy said, you know, I'm not an expert. That's why I'm asking you this question. Any safety issues? First floor versus second floor
In
with
terms of
science
egress?
lab. You know, when you handle science
Right.
stuff, chemicals, things like that. So are we considering that?
So if I had to, we didn't do a full code analysis of the building, but if someone escaped and I would think the stairwell would be a safe place, and it's the same distance that someone would have to travel either way, first or second floor, but the stairwell would be your safe. Once you reach the stairwell, you should be in a safe space.
Thanks.
Is that what you meant? Like
Yeah,
if there was
yeah.
an emergency in the lab space?
Yes.
Right?
Where is the access to utilities? I mean, there's, on the second floor, I think Mr. Bauer asked about water and gas lines and those type of things. And are those located currently in the ceiling? Where do you remember where those are at?
No,
Didn't
we
evaluate
didn't.
those at this
No.
point.
I don't think there's any up there, Jerry.
Could they be run?
Well, there
was probably no need for them to expand.
yeah, there would be water because we have restrooms.
Yeah,
and
but
that
they're
type
in the cores on where the
On
restrooms
the
are at.
corners, yeah.
I mean, they're right over the current science.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
We did evaluate where the utilities were on the main level. We didn't see any necessarily, I mean, this was outside of the scope of this particular item, so we didn't evaluate how to get utilities to the second floor, but we didn't see any major encumbrances to getting them from the first floor to the second floor.
Jerry, I get back to your comment about a big portion of the cost is in the cabinetry and all the things that are there.
I mean, that's what adds to the additional cost, than just doing a classroom.
And getting the utility, I mean, would we really not be better off redoing where we're at with everything that's there and the access that's already existing and all that? I mean, even if, you know, I know it's 7 out of 10 in this particular picture, but can you be more creative and take some of the other space that's there for special, you know, whatever that might be? And it feels like you're not moving all the utilities up to the second floor then. You could maybe even spend more on the enhancements that you want in those rooms. I don't know, just, Feels like we're moving it into a section of the building that's sort of unencumbered, but also would cost more to move there than trying to fit it where it is today. I don't
No,
know,
that's-
maybe that's for you.
That's,
Maybe-
no, that's a good,
If you want to address Aaron's question on the utilities, part of because where it's located, it wasn't as costly to move the utilities. Maybe if you want to talk a little bit about that.
In terms of,
From the current science area to the proposed science area.
The second floor.
Yeah, there's a second floor.
Floor.
Why isn't there a huge cost savings by just saying in the current science area?
so in the current area, we're sort of landlocked, right? We've got these labs that are interconnected, and if we start making, like the option we looked at, we definitely don't have the 10 lab lecture rooms that we need for the future. And recapturing more than what we are trying in option 3, I don't think is feasible for the school.
Well,
Is that right?
I think Aaron's question goes more towards the utilities as far as the gas and so forth. Why is it close to being as cost-effective going on the second floor than it is on the first floor? Does that make sense?
Yes, and I don't know if we looked at the demolition cost,
Okay.
but I would imagine if we're rearranging or there's a reconfiguration of that whole area, I don't think it would be as simple as we're just making this room larger. I think there would be more to that, especially with the cabinets and equipment we saw that was so outdated. It's probably very old. So I would imagine a higher demolition cost too, which we did not consider.
Can we capture any of the, so I'm looking at the picture on page 6, which is the first floor. On the right-hand side, where there's classroom space listed, and it looks like there's 3 rooms, and I guess I can't visualize what that is today.
Special ed.
Special ed.
So is there any possibility if we were looking to, so special ed is marked over to the right. I'm actually looking kind of down, not in the full bottom right-hand corner, but those just say classroom.
Those
It
are,
looks like the mechanical rooms in between.
that's the new addition. There's probably a hard structural wall between there.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Because that used to be the outside wall there where that line is.
Yep,
In a mechanical room, I think there's a landlocked boiler in that room.
yep, so that is what that is. Okay, so that's not,
They did look at recapturing, Tammy, on the one side, the office area. You know, if you wanted to expand it out that far and recapture the office area, and then also some more special ed area. But I think when they looked at that, the feeling was you would be disrupting. Where would the office areas be? That location's a good location for that, and so forth. So I think they decided not to look at expanding it out. Because you can always recapture areas if you want. You can always expand it to other areas. But
right.
What's the size of our science faculty? How many folks are there in the department?
we have, with part-time and permanent, I think we have a total of 10.
I think, 10 is
Yeah.
what I got off there.
Yep.
So I see on option 4, I see 10 lab rooms and 2 lecture rooms, which would indicate to me that at any given point, you have at least 2 rooms not being used, unless you're planning on looking at adding staff. Is that the plan?
No, I'm not sure. I think there's 10 total rooms, and 2 of those
Oh,
are
I'm
lecture
sorry.
rooms.
I'm sorry.
So there's a total of 10
Yeah, I
rooms.
can't count tonight.
That's okay.
So that would be everybody's, so what do they do now with what, 9 rooms you said and 10 folks? You. Okay. 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 So yeah, I guess I'd just be concerned, and it doesn't sound like it, but I wouldn't want any of these rooms sitting empty.
Yeah.
Good.
Yep.
Well, I think it gets back to Tim's question on math using it, industrial and. all those-
Sure.
all those other- I mean, but you're right, then where does?
But I don't want
That's
to
being
build a
used towards
science room
everyone
for math instruction if it's science rooms are the most expensive kind.
Well, I think that's where the key is that you can't get these tied to just science. They're a STEM lab that other core curriculums can use for STEM activities.
Well, I think that's the question, are they, or are they really science?
Well, I guess that is a question.
Well, I
It's
think, and you can't necessarily say we're gonna make all of them STEM labs, because a chemistry lab is a little bit different, and he has some different, requirements and needs. You know, I think the key is to make sure that the labs have flexibility.
Right.
Because you know, one of the things that we hope that it occurs over the next few years is that our STEM curriculum grows, and that we have a more robust STEM curriculum. But I you know, the thing that started this whole process was that our actual science labs were so inadequate. I mean, that's what drove all this. What we want to make sure we include STEM, because that is the best connection for our kids in making these interdisciplinary connections, and and that's so important. But I think we need to make sure we meet the needs of our core science folks, and we have facilities that will enable STEM activities to be done. And Tim, you can speak to this far better than I can, but you know, STEM runs the gamut. It's not there's no typical STEM.
Right.
And so how we look at our industrial tech area, how we look at some other areas of the building, we also need to look at with the idea of that it could possibly be a STEM area.
We're only talking just 2 chemistry labs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Everything else will be generic science
Yeah.
lab.
Yeah.
Okay.
You guys, 4 is your favorite option, right? Can we hear from you guys too? Anybody want to come to the podium and tell us what you guys like about it? I mean, I don't mean to kick you guys out. I just am very interested in hearing what the teachers have to say.
So I'm Sarah Walsh. I'm one of the biology and then environmental science teachers, and this is Mike Bobet, one of the chemistry and AP Chem teachers. In this process, well, first of all, I want to thank the school board and the school for including us so much. I think that for a lot of this has been a very exciting thing to finally be talking about actually getting new science classrooms, because as Dr. Reeby said, safety is a huge concern of ours. In terms of the options that were shown to us, if we lived in our, world where money wasn't an option, I think having a separate building would be great and having all of our names on the front of it and everything. But unfortunately, we have to deal with, the financials and the realistic aspects of this issue. Considering the 2 options that we most recently looked at, option 3 and 4, we liked option 4 for several reasons. Probably the biggest reason was that there wouldn't be a disruption, or as much of a disruption, both to us and then to the students and to the rest of the school during the process of it being built. It also, which was even as important as that, has more science rooms, more square footage, and light, which I agree that it's important for all students and teachers to be exposed to light, but as a biology teacher and an environmental science teacher, it's kind of imperative to my curriculum that I have access to light, and I can say that for all of the biology teachers as well with the experiments that we do. So those, and I don't know, Mike, if you want to add more.
I just think that option 4 out of all of them just met all of our current needs. Safety being one of the largest ones. We have some rooms right now that only have 1 exit. There are some rooms that don't have drains for safety showers. There's a whole list of some things that if they'd done differently a long time ago, they probably should have. So option 4 gives us that kind of open space to do all of these things the right way and have natural lighting, more room. The concern about running utilities up, there are if you walk down the main hallway of the current science room, there is a gas line that goes across above, and so some of those utilities I think would be easy to move up. If we renovated the entire downstairs, moving those utilities into the correct locations for new rooms would also, I think, be very expensive to tear up the foundation really of the area to run all of that. So I think maybe moving things up might not be as difficult as it might seem right now. but
So
I'm
we-
no expert on that.
Will you address the elevator, because you know what the elevator looks like, and I'm questioning that it's truly a freight elevator. So if you had a huge project, I don't know what that would be, but, you know, okay, you're gonna work with the ag teachers or the industrial tech people, you could do it in that location, in their location, rather than upstairs. Because I'm not thinking you can get too much in that elevator.
Yeah, well, we were kind of
Yeah.
thinking, what kind of projects would be that?
We were really interested to know what ideas of these huge projects
Yeah,
that you
okay.
guys had. Are we
Electrothon.
bringing horses up? Or I don't-
Electrothon, there's a lot of
It was
projects
really
like that.
interesting.
Robots.
It's not a huge elevator.
Robots.
Yeah.
Robotics, yeah, there's a lot of things.
I think in terms of what our curriculum is that we're doing now and that we anticipate in the future, the projects that we're doing, we could do in that space, or we could utilize a different space like you had suggested in the building or on campus. Yeah. I'm thinking physics does projects where they go outside and they'll, you know, drop things, you know, from high distances and stuff like that. And I think we would anticipate that those things would still occur in those locations. And there were no concerns from any of the teachers in terms of that issue as of now.
I don't want to interrupt you, but will you come up to the podium so we can, I know you don't want to, but our audience at home wants to be able to hear you too, and I know what you have to say is valuable.
This is Jen Hardy. She's a chemistry teacher as well.
And I didn't score any points with Jen, so.
When I first started working at Muscatine High School, I was working in the project-based G-squared program that we used to have. And one of the projects I did was a STEAM project. It involved arts as well. And it was building a large periodic table. And I would have to say that as a cross-curricular program itself, we were in each other's rooms. So I would go to the math department for a while. We would do some mathematics in their rooms. We would go to my classroom and do a little bit. I would go to the art room to get the paints and supplies I needed. I know some of the physics teachers back then were working with hovercrafts and large things like that, and we utilized the gym, or I'm sure that the industrial tech area would be able to accommodate us on large projects like that as well. So I think it's important not just for them to come to our area upstairs in the science new science wing, but also for us to be truly cross-curricular to enter their classrooms as well, and to really have our students feel the importance of being in their surroundings, because they're going to have the equipment that we need to utilize, for art. The art supply room will be the best. For mathematics, they're going to have wonderful things there for us to use. So I think that it doesn't have to be all social, in that one central location. I think we should be walking to each other's classrooms and being cross-curricular in that sense. So that's what I was going to add.
Thank you, guys.
Any other questions?
What are next steps?
Yeah, next steps, I think Jerry and
Yeah.
Tom were going to walk through as far as the financing steps, going over that.
And that's it's probably a little premature to talk about complete financing because we don't really have an exact cost. We did put what, $7 million I think was the original allotment. We had budgeted for it. I would hope that our cost wouldn't exceed that by much. These are, like I said, they were very conservative numbers, but I would hope that we would be able to keep it to that. But until we have the design work done, the plan work done, and actually get bids, it's always a little bit of a guessing game. Tom has worked on some cash flow with this and what that would look like, assuming we would begin in January.
So we just took that cash flow we looked at a couple months ago and revised it in a couple of different ways.
Sorry, that was my fault.
We took off the early childhood pre-K center, and that was around $3 million, I believe. And then we just adjusted the MHS Science STEM amount from 7 million to 8.8. And, you know, we want to look at that second to last column on the right, you know, where's our cash flow, and we're above, almost at 2 million still throughout these other projects that we still have in the future with McKinley and finishing up the PE Center and possible MHS Stadium renovation. So I guess this kind of shows that cash flow and then using that $8.8 million figure.
So you need for the board to select one of the options
Yeah,
forward for an RFP.
Before the process can move forward, we would need to, probably the board would need to decide on an option. The other thing I guess could be done is if the board would want to approve an RFP for design and architectural services.
I'm sorry, for what?
For design and architectural services. That process could begin, and it would give the board some time to ponder which of those options you like the best, because it'd be at least the September meeting, the August meeting, before we could make the board can make a decision on a firm. So there's some latitude with that. I would encourage, though, that we do get, if the board wants to move forward with this project, either the first floor, second floor, or whatever it might be, that we begin the process of selecting the engineering firm, the architectural firm.
I'm struggling with the options. I don't know why, but I just am. But I think we need to get quotes out there, estimates for RFPs, or an RFP for the architectural services. I just need to do some additional research on this, I guess.
If we ask for an RFP, are we basically asking whomever to design a couple different things based on the possible locations? And does that
Well, you know, the more you ask of them, the more it costs. And so, you know, if the board would say we want to do the second floor option, that's what I would recommend. We would move the architecture firm to start working in that area. If you say we want to redo the current area, that's where we'd move to. It just you're going to increase your cost by asking them to do both. Mm-hmm. So
Tim, is it the location you've got an issue with, or is it the design? Or?
I don't know. I just don't feel good about it. I don't know. What's everybody else think? Maybe I'm just the only one thinking that way.
So I'll start, Tim. I think cost, it still seems pretty vague. Jerry, you mentioned they're very conservative, right? And you know, the standalone building was 1,000 a square foot, and you know, Tim, you rattled off 250 a square foot. So that's a big difference, right? And I don't know if we have any averages from any of the other schools we spoke with, or not.
It seems like for science work, it's about 450 a square foot.
Is what?
Is about 450 a square foot would be about in the ballpark for science areas.
For remodels or for standalone?
Well, I think just for construction. And to get into, you know, the when you do a new build and you have to put in a new foundation and do all of that work, you know, obviously there's more additional cost with it. You're not putting in a new roof, you're not putting in a new foundation, you're not putting in additional heating and cooling. You know, you're having all those costs that go with an additional area. But I would also be the first to tell you, I'm not allowed to make those decisions at home. You know, so you know, really, what you know, I don't know if there are many options outside of the ones that we've been given, and so you know, it's just a matter of which one the board feels most comfortable with.
I mean, to me, it seems like the one that offers the most space makes sense, and the teacher's recommendation, I think, is is weighty as well. You know, just looking at the map, you've got more room on the second floor. You know, assuming the utility and other concerns can be overcome, that, you know, whatever the ultimate design ends up being, I think that is the location that makes the most sense.
Yeah, my three were just a better understanding of the costs, and especially of the standalone portion of the cost, if it could vary from
Yeah, I
a
just
quarter.
Googled it, and it's like $500 a square foot.
Yeah, I mean, so anyway, so there's I have three costs. I also think we're talking about these as science labs and not STEM labs, you know, and not making room for the other areas to maybe come into these. But I understand getting to the other classrooms is good as well, so that, and then the third one is the egress, basically. How do you get in and out for projects and things like that? Those are my three. So do we really have an understanding of what the costs are here? And it feels like they're going to be less than what we're talking about, so that's good. Second is it truly STEM or is it just science? And then third is just the access if it is on the second floor. Those are the three I have.
So when this was phase 3 or phase 4 before, were there any blueprints or design of what that was going to be? Because this was the space that it was going to be.
Right. Not that I'm aware of. It was just a concept to put it on the second floor. I don't know, Tim, if you have a different
I was
recollection.
thinking a large portion was in the science where they're currently at, but also in the industrial tech area.
Yeah, but it got moved up.
I had a
Yeah, it was
recollection of
going to be
them
moved
being in
upstairs.
these rooms upstairs.
It was part of the phase was to move it up. Yeah. Yep.
But I mean, this thing's been almost 10 years in the plan.
But it was just a concept.
Okay.
I believe there wasn't any, yeah.
So Aaron, it seems to me that your primary concern with upstairs is the access question.
Yeah, that's what I would, yeah.
And I think the cost associated with, what's a realistic cost for some of these numbers.
Yeah, it feels like moving the types of utilities we talked about needing for science, moving those around the building should be much more expensive than remodeling in place.
Right.
Especially if a lot of the costs are the cabinetry and the fixtures and all that, right? It feels, but I trust that so that was mine, feels like remodeling should be less expensive, but maybe it isn't.
Well, and I think it is.
Depends on the building.
It's less expensive if you just remodel the area. The problem with that was the space.
That was less space per square foot.
Right.
Is what surprises me.
Right, the non-construction options are all roughly similar in terms of
Yeah,
square
they're all the
footage
same
cost.
square footage costs, but to move it completely on a different floor is the same square footage as remodeling in place. I get that it's less square feet, but the cost per square foot is almost identical in all three of those.
And Tim, were you thinking of a WOW facility not in the high school? Is that what?
No, I wanted a WOW facility wherever it best sit in the building. And I don't know, WOW, it might be a little bit too strong of a word, but I wanted to make sure it was functional and met the needs of everybody.
Well, I'm not sure wow is a bad word.
No, wow is not a bad word. It costs money
We do
sometimes.
want this to be, and the way science areas are done now, you can have wow, and it's still a very functional area. It's not necessarily ornate.
I think what I see a little bit, though, that concerns me, and I understand chemistry is separate or different, but biology is the same. You don't really want to specialize them too much because there are many generic things happen in all the different science areas or STEM areas, and that's where I'm just struggling with the layout here.
What can you do, I guess, what can you not do in a chemistry lab that you could do in the others? I just don't know. I mean, what's the
You're gonna have to have
differentiation?
vent hoods.
Vent hood.
Is that it, yeah?
So we ask the expert here.
Gas
Right?
burners.
Additional fire protection because of the vent hoods gets expensive.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
But there's no reason those rooms couldn't be used for other things, it's just they have to have additional for the chemistry.
Specialized areas, I mean, not everything's done with the Bunsen burner, so to speak.
That was what I learned.
But, I don't know.
So if we put out, if the board were to vote to put out the RFP to begin the architectural services, we still would not have to commit on an option at this meeting. Is that what I heard you say, Jerry?
You know,
We probably need to provide some direction.
I hear some, that the board may not be ready to pick an option tonight. My concern is, if we don't get some of the process started, it's going to be, we're just pushing the start date down the road farther.
Right.
And so when you go about selecting the architectural firm, probably the exact option isn't as important as what they bring to the table for working in this kind of area. Because you know what we asked Stanley to do, and they did for us, is did an evaluation of what you got, make a recommendation of where's maybe the best use of space, and some rationale for those things. The details that will need to go into the design obviously are going to have to be substantially more, and getting the specifications so that it can go to a bidding process is going to be much more detailed. So, and none of that can begin until a firm is selected. And so it would, if we can't, the board would choose to, okay, we want to ponder this one. I would recommend we get the RFPs out so that firms can, we can get a firm on board.
Okay.
Can we hire the firm and start with them taking a look at this?
Yeah, right.
Giving us a recommendation, their recommendation?
Yes.
Yeah,
I'd be comfortable with that.
yeah.
And to our staff that is here, one, we so appreciate you coming and your time. And what I am hearing the board say is not that it is not needed. So I guess that's the first thing that I would like to make sure that when you leave tonight, you don't feel completely disappointed, like, hey, nobody wants it, because I think I can speak for all of us that we do. But when we make a large purchase, we also want to know we feel solid about it, and I think we also would each agree this isn't necessarily our area of expertise, and so sometimes we need a little time to even just mull it over, sleep on it, think about it, ask some more questions. So I don't want you to be disappointed. That's my first and foremost for you all, because again, we appreciate the time Stanley's has put in, we appreciate the time that you all have worked with them, and your opinion is very important to us. You are guiding us, so we rely on that heavily, so thank you for that. So what are the wishes of the board?
So I'll make a motion to approve a request for proposal to select architectural services for the high school science project.
And is there a second?
I guess my question with that motion is, are we telling them what to do? Does that motion tell us what the architectural service firm is going to do for us?
Well, without an option, the RFP will need to be a little more broad than if it were more specific.
Are we in a position where we can? Are we in a position where we can select at least a location? I mean, is there anybody who wants either the standalone or the bottom floor as opposed to the top floor that's recommended?
I'm not ready to pick the location yet.
Okay.
And I don't think that will slow.
That won't slow.
I don't think things will slow, because until they're selected and the board approves that, they're not going to do any work anyway.
All right, I guess, yeah, we couldn't do that till next meeting anyway.
Yeah, yeah. So that would be my recommendation. I just feel like we need to start getting.
How can we put out or how can anybody give us an RFP if we don't have any specifics for them?
Well, what we're going to really be asking for is, we would ask for examples of areas that they've worked on in science, maybe RFP is not as the best term as far as we'd be interviewing for an architectural firm, but I think RFP we would put out there. I mean, we would be looking for design services. We'd be looking for cost estimation services. We'd be looking for blueprint services, for the preparing for bid services. I mean, those kind of things we would be putting out there for folks to give us some estimate, and it wouldn't be a dollar estimate, but everybody, I think they have typically a percentage of the total that they work off of. So we would have ask for that kind of information. What percentage of the total project do they?
The statute does require that we'd have to approve them through a formal RFP process, right?
Similar to like we do with RFK.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Projects for all the, so just be focused on science, the STEM
Yeah.
project.
All right, well, I'll second the motion, I guess.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded to release an RFP for architectural services for our MHS science project. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And the motion carries. We're one step closer. Thank you again for your input and for coming, and thank you to Stanley's for the work that you have provided us and helping to educate us on what I think is a tough topic. So thank you for that. The next item on our agenda is Community Eligibility Provision, which is CEP, for Franklin, Jefferson, Madison, and McKinley. And I see Tom and Alicia making a beeline to the podium. And Scott. Maybe Scott's gonna present too, but he's exiting quickly.
Okay. So we're gonna switch gears here and talk about food service, so.
Not kitchen construction.
No, not kitchen, nothing.
Or equipment.
Yeah. Inputs, not outputs, right? Okay, so we're gonna just talk about, just give you a brief update on our school meals administrative review that happened this year. Our participation recap for 17-18. We're gonna talk about the new school meal debt legislation and community eligibility provision, or the CEP, and then looking forward to 18-19.
Okay, the review for our nutrition policy and procedures took place January 8th through the 11th of this year. All school nutrition programs participating in the National School Lunch, Breakfast, and Fruit and Vegetable programs are thoroughly audited every 3 years. It used to be 5, and now it's 3. We did receive 4 corrective actions. They have all been corrected or in the process of being corrected. 2 of the violations or corrective actions was minimal language changes that had to be made with our software program. Another one was the serving, just the serving procedures at one of the elementary buildings. And they visited the day that we had to rush to dismiss because of the snowstorm on January 11th. They rushed into the elementary building because they were both like an hour and a half away, lived an hour and a half away from us. So they were in a rush. The building was in a rush, and yeah, so we've straightened that out for next year. And the last thing was, they have charged us with putting our standard operating procedures all in one document. We have several documents that we're going to piece together, and I have a committee that we're all going to work together on just a variety of different things, and probably giving them more than what they really need. But so.
Okay. And also I'll add that we received very positive feedback from the 3 consultants that were here, and realized too that it wasn't just those 4 days that I shouldn't say we, I should say Alicia and Cammie prepared for this triannual, I guess, review. And so they did a great job, and I thought we had very good feedback from the consultants.
Good? Yep. Nice.
I think.
Okay, next, the next 2 slides, and you can see them on your handouts there, maybe not so much on the PowerPoint up here, but it's just a recap of our participation for 2017-18 for both, the first slide is the breakfast by building, and then the next slide is lunch. So.
The breakfast and lunch diagrams are broken down in meal statuses categories. If you we'll take a look at lunch. Thank you. So they're divided into free, reduced, paid, and total. The potential column is how many students will look at the high school. 95,420 potential meals, which is 95,420 students throughout the whole school year that were approved for free meals. And we served 53,301, which was an average daily participation of 56%. So you follow that all the way across for the reduced. You can see the category in the reduced areas, the paid areas, and then the total for the whole year.
Alicia, if you had a crystal ball, what do you think is happening to the difference between, and I'm going to call them 95,000 meals, right? Because it's really 95,000 meals. I mean, that's a big difference. It's a 40-some thousand, 40,000 difference in meals. Do you think that those are just not going, do we have students who are choosing not to eat?
We do have students that are choosing not to eat, and since the laws changed in 2012, we do have a lot more students that are actually bringing sack lunches. That was when the laws went into effect with the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act.
When the hamburger bun went from...
Yeah, it went from like 2 ounces white
whatever it
to
was,
2 ounces of whole grain. So we're still locked into those regulations. We cannot opt out of the National School Lunch Program. There's some differences in Iowa than there are in other states. Other states can opt out. Other states' general fund can finance the food service department, whereas in Iowa that can't happen either. We have at the end of the presentation, we were going to talk about looking forward to 18-19, and we're going to try some new things. We want to try some plant-based diets, which are just different things like pasta with balsamic vinegar and just different things like that to try to improve what we're currently serving. The a la carte dollars also funds our program, and we don't have a recap of that, but it is also located in the trend. We've got another commercial pizza vendor that is doing very, very well, that the students picked, that they had a say in the selection of that vendor. We're also going to add that to the middle schools, and I'm sure that that's going to increase participation too.
So of those that are, and I'm thinking less about food choice as I am, of those 95,000 meals, so we've identified those students, have they also applied or filled out whatever paperwork they need to fill out to receive the meal as well?
Well, like this, that is how many qualify for free meals. That's how many students over the course of the year that qualify for free meals, at 95,420. That's just free students for the whole year that we're taking all, 177 days times whatever to get that total in that category.
And they know, if I'm that student, I know that I'm not eating because I can't afford it and I don't know that I qualify. I mean, I guess that's my question, that do we have students that would be going hungry because I don't know that it's available to me?
Well, we do send an online menu every day. We have one page of that menu. The third page of that menu is what's the options that are available daily. Those don't change. Then we have the second and third page that describes what the entrees and the sides are for each line. So it's like a food court, but we email that every day to all the staff members and all the students. In notification letters, we explain what the meals are.
Can I register for, as a student without my guardian, can I register for a free and reduced meal, or do I need a parental guardian to sign off on something as well that says, to verify what my household income level is, as an example?
If a student fills out an application, we take applications at face value.
Okay.
The only time that there's a verification process is once a year when we are required to do that, and then the parent or whomever is filling out the application, then they do have to submit pay stubs or for a month, or like a notice of decision from the State Department.
Okay.
And Tammy, if you look, you can see the elementary schools and middle schools are like at 80% for the same group. So, but look across, high school drops in half across all three. I mean,
right.
They're either bringing, they maybe not even staying, right? They're heading out for
true.
lunch or whatever.
I didn't think about not staying, yeah.
I mean, it
Yeah,
looks
if
like
they-
the
yeah.
high school drops across the board relative to the elementary, middle school averages, right? So they're making choice, they've probably had that
They have some
free
more
meal
freedoms to
through
do
the
that.
elementary, middle school, but they're choosing other things when they get to high school or
Yeah.
whatever it looks like.
That makes sense.
They could also be bringing their lunch.
Is there any more questions or? Okay. So next we have this new school meal debt legislation. Some states have already passed lunch shaming laws. New to Iowa this school year is legislation that prevents school districts from publicly identifying or shaming students who do not have money for meals. Although the law does not require school districts to provide the same meal as their peers, it does encourage them to offer a hot meal. Things that will change for some schools with this new resolution, or with the new legislation, excuse me. Kids will not be stigmatized, which in listening to these things, we are not doing these. It's just to give you an idea of some things that have been identified in our own state that changes have been needed to be made. Examples of stigmatism: seating students at different tables, students having their hand stamps, posted names of students who owe money, students required to do chores for their meals. There will also be no trade-upping, which means meals will not be discarded if funds are not available at the end of the line from the student. Families will be notified more often about meal assistance available. Currently, schools are only required to notify parents once per year. Now the requirement will be twice and can be more often if students owe money for more than 5 meals. Schools were already taking donations, but legislation is now allowing for it. We are waiting for more guidance from the DE's Bureau of Health and Nutrition Services, but tax refunds and lottery winnings could be withheld from parents of students owing more than $500 and if schools have made reasonable efforts to collect within 2 years. Kids are hungry, and there are many, many reasons that parents do not or cannot send the money to school. Prior to the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act, we offered an alternative meal, which was like a peanut butter sandwich or a cheese sandwich for allergen schools and a glass of orange juice. After a certain number of meals were charged by the student, and that was determined by grade level. Negative balance have continued to climb due to offering the same meal to all hungry kids regardless of how much money they owe.
So on the PowerPoint, you can see there a little history of what has Muscatine Schools' negative balance been over the last 4 years. And I think it's important to note in FY17, so last school year that just ended, not just ended, last school year. So we ended the year with a negative 1405, but I think it's important to know we did get some large donations last year, so we would have been maybe around 6,500 or so negative if it wasn't for those donations. And now you can see in FY18 what our negative balance is as of the end of the school year. And Alicia will talk about what we do, and we haven't changed anything either, what we do to notify parents.
We use School Messenger to notify parents of low and negative balances. We encourage families to apply for free and reduced meals by sending applications several times throughout the year and at the beginning of each school year. We make personal phone calls, send letters home with students, management intervention, and sometimes even involving principals and counselors.
And I have one more. It's not on our list, but I just want to say that when business managers get together and we talk about stuff, this is a topic that we have about what do we do with donations, because we don't want to single out anybody, because we can't, right? So what do schools do? Because we would get donations for specific buildings or just all negative balances or whatever. So, some schools just take their donations and proportionally divide it among everybody with a negative balance. So, there is basically no guidance for schools on what to do when we get the donation. Should we not accept donations, or lots of tough things to think about, but those are some of the things that we have to think about.
We do have some good news. So we wanted to talk about community eligibility provision, which is CEP. CEP percent is not the same as building free and reduced percentages, which is the total number of students that qualify for free and reduced meals, including those that qualify based upon income, applications, and enrollment. Community eligibility provision, AKA CEP, is a non-pricing meal service option for schools. It allows districts to serve breakfast and lunch at no cost to all enrolled students without collecting household applications. Schools that qualify are those that have 40% or more of enrolled students who are eligible for free meals due to automatically qualifying through the state. This could include students in foster care, homeless, those that qualify for supplemental nutrition assistant programs, and or Medicaid recipients. To determine eligibility, USDA provides a worksheet to help us guide with our financial decision. Factors include projected increase in participation, federal reimbursement, revenue from reduced and free paid meals. Pros is increased participation, decreased negative balances. Currently 46% of our balances, the schools that qualify for this. No collection efforts needed, no processing of free and reduced applications.
Okay, so I get the cons. And so the cons to CEP, there's a couple. So determination for other programs. So we use free and reduced percentages to report for Title I. Okay, Title I, we have to know what our free and reduced is because that's what Title I is based on, right? And then we also, for fee waiver status, we use that application for students that may either have their fees waived or fees reduced. So we have to take that into consideration. And so parents would receive the CEP announcement, assuming, if we go this direction, the parents in those 4 buildings would receive a CEP announcement, a household survey to determine whether they are eligible for fee waiver. So they'll get the letter saying their child, I don't know if this is really a con, but I'll explain it anyway. But they'll get a letter saying, their child they won't have to pay because of the CEP designation, and then they get this household survey, and then that household survey would be used for determination of other fee waivers and for use in our title program. So we'd have to determine how that would get administered.
Another con is not all schools will be CEP. So a middle schooler, parents may have to pay for a middle schooler or a child that attends a different elementary building. Yeah. So there would be that as a con, that they would have, meals would be free for maybe possibly one of their children, but if they have 3, 2 of them, they may have to pay.
So that would be a con.
Yep. CEP is an election for 4 years. We do not have to reapply annually. CEP can end at any time, including mid-year if financial or other concerns emerge. Schools that qualify can automatically be added. We tried many different scenarios to even include middle schools, and it just wasn't financially beneficial. Based on USDA's decision worksheet, eligible as CEP group are Franklin, Jefferson, Madison, and McKinley. This would cover 63.9% of our elementary students. It's 86 reduced students and 432 paid. If students transfer within our district from a provision school to a non-provision school, they would be given a 10-day grace period, so they wouldn't have to pay for 10 days, which also would give them time to fill out a free and reduced application, if need be. Savings to families could potentially be $350,000. For us, it would be an increase of about $1,800. Well, with the worksheet in projecting a 15% increase with breakfast and a 15% increase in lunch.
So we would get $1,800 more in revenue
Yeah,
than we do now.
now,
Okay,
for those 4 schools.
Yeah.
Per student or total?
No, total.
So our
So it's
revenue,
pretty flat.
basically, our revenue shows that
They're gonna make up the
with
difference.
a 15% estimate increase in participation, that we'll still be ahead by $1,800.
So we'll feed more students, potentially.
That's the goal.
However, we also have the tracking, which will take some time and labor. I mean, there's a cost associated to that, right?
So the tracking for,
Just even from sending out the information to getting forms back to,
so the.
Which we're already doing that now. I mean, honestly, we have to send out a communication letter to all families anyway. We have to process their free and reduced applications. And looking forward to 18-19, we've added online free and reduced application to our software program. So families will be able to complete that in a more convenient, confidential manner at home. And it will be automatically submitted versus us doing it manually.
So in these schools where everybody is paid for, what's the incentive to complete the form?
So a family would not have to complete it, but there's other reasons that they would complete it for fee waivers for our instructional material fee. Okay, if they don't fill it out, they'll.
Driver's ed, band.
Driver's ed, band.
So you're not worried about a reduction in the amount of forms you get completed? Or does it, and would it even hurt anything?
It's not, I don't believe it's gonna hurt anything. We would be getting the form anyway. It's just the nutrition department won't be overseeing that. It's going to be somebody else
For those 4 schools?
for those 4 schools, yeah.
how long has this program been in effect?
It's
At
been
least-
probably at least 4 years, maybe. but
Well,
it
as
wasn't-
more than that. I know in the Omaha area, there were probably 10 years ago, there were schools that were doing this. So at least
This is the first time
maybe in
that it's
Iowa,
been
maybe it's.
financially beneficial to us, to where the reimbursement has gotten high enough. I mean, our prices, I mean, because we had to continue to raise them to meet the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act, that it wasn't leveling out, and now it's shown to where it's beneficial. And I've spoke to other school districts that have had like 70% increase in breakfast, which is very exciting.
What do the schools that aren't in it, what's the sort of PR around this when 4 schools do and the other schools don't?
Well, that's probably one of the cons, and I think they kind of mentioned that, is that you'll have some people, well, why do we have to pay for lunch?
Yeah.
Of course, we could always say we do have room in those schools.
But yeah, there might be more transfer requests.
But that is, it's certainly not a nutritional issue, it's a political issue with that. The issue of, well, some buildings you're going to be paying lunch and some aren't.
But you still have the free and reduced available in those other buildings.
Oh, absolutely. And even with the online applications, we're still going to be, the parents will still have access to the hard copies if they prefer that. We do recommend that they turn them into the administration center, just because then we can process them faster.
If the online applications came in more readily, better information, and all of a sudden we see a building that's not qualified under the CEP, but now is, can you do it mid-year, or do you have to wait to the end of the year?
We can.
That was one of the.
I mean, that's kind of
I
how I
thought you could get
understood
out
it.
mid-year.
And just
Oh, is that what it
remember
said?
that the CEP qualifies not based on your
Well, the
free and
qualified
reduced
can be
percentage of that building.
Perfect.
It's,
don't know if it's
it
mid-year
has,
or if it's
there's
mid-year,
a
but yeah.
different percentage that we were talking about, that 40%. And refresh their
It's
memories about what those were.
Those are, the 40%, what is included in that are recipients of supplemental assistance, nutrition assistant programs, homeless, foster care. It's the ones that automatically qualify from through the state.
So it's more than just free and reduced?
Right.
It is, yeah.
Okay, because that's where I was struggling, because a lot of every school is under 40%.
And that's the distinction
Right.
that we want to make sure we're
Yes.
clear on.
Yes.
And Alicia gets that information from the state. Isn't that the direct certification? Part of that?
Yeah.
So
Oh, okay, so it's outside of our
it's
collection.
outside of.
Okay.
So what can we do, I guess, to market and improve participation in these. I mean, because we've got, obviously there's a much lower breakfast rate, but even there's still only a 3/4 participation rate at lunch for the free and reduced folks. You know, it would seem to me to behoove us that to have a greater effort to get kids to take these meals if we're on the CEP program in these schools.
Absolutely.
The other thing that that we found, and Elena may have some of this information, but a majority of our chronically absent kids are those on free and reduced price lunch. So if they aren't there, they aren't eating either.
But yeah,
Well, that counts in here, right? I mean, that would be included in this gap,
if
right?
they're not there, they're not taking a meal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some are probably
Yeah.
bringing lunches too because they're, right? So this is the total potential meals that could be served.
Right.
If everybody showed
I mean,
up.
75% seems relative to
Right.
how picky my kids are at what they get served. I mean,
Wow.
75% seems like a pretty high rate with, when you take in absentees, bringing in your own lunch, that seems like it's a pretty high rate, relatively speaking.
Yeah. I'd recently learned through another presentation I saw that there's 1,700 kids estimated in Muscatine County that are food insecure, which is defined as missing 3 or more meals a week, which means kids in this county are missing over 250,000 meals a year. And just by my really rough math, if we could, you know, this could make up half that difference just at these schools. I mean, obviously these kids aren't all going to those 4 schools, but, you know, just having that kind of opportunity available, that, you know, someone's paying for it obviously, but at no cost to the district, I think would be huge.
And I think, Alicia, you mentioned the uncollected balances. What percent? Do you remember what percentage came from those 4 schools?
46.
Sure.
It doesn't mean those negative balances would go away. It's just
Right.
starting in, this
Right.
school year, they would have.
Right.
So we still would have
Well,
collection.
and in the grand scheme of things, you know, I'd rather eat that 16 grand and feed some kids. No pun intended, I realize.
Yeah. Well, Alicia has been a real advocate for making sure that our students are fed. And, she has, that is where she has drawn her line in the sand, is that kids are going to be fed. And I really appreciate that.
Good.
Thank you.
So you need a motion from us to approve participation in this program?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
Sure,
we
Is
have-
that,
That is.
I think that would make sense. This is a new practice. It is a change. It's going to affect some, not others. And so I think it's best if the board would.
I'll second that.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the community eligibility provision, which is a CEP for Franklin, Jefferson, Madison, and McKinley. And I will add to that, those are, that is how the mandate runs. We did not randomly pick those 4 schools.
Correct.
That is how the rules work. So for those 4 schools. Is there any other discussion?
I would only add that we talked to a few schools that have recently rolled this out and see how they communicate to the entire district how schools are selected and how they're not.
Yeah.
I just think we need to be clear on that with everyone as well as we can be.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, I think it's.
There is certainly the opportunity for emotion or hard feelings to be
Yes.
developed on
Right.
this.
Yeah, this is, yes.
Right. Which is not the intention.
I think it's critical to know that there's not a cost to the district that's
Yeah.
actually a wash. So.
a little bit to the up.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And the motion carries.
Thank you.
Looks like we're going to feed more kids.
Okay.
Are you just going to hang
I'll
tight
just
up
stay
there?
right here, just to.
Perfect. This is everyone's most favorite time,
Oh.
Tom.
All right, so in the board book is the May financials, the treasurer's report. I have no comments other than it pretty much looks like the April treasurer's report. And the next page is our general fund through May, okay? And again, I believe we are on target for our revenues and expenses. So I would skip to the third page of regarding the budget. And, you know, June now is this time where we're gathering all of our accruals, if you will, and making sure our June or July and August expenditures that are really for FY18 get recorded. So next month we'll have a really good understanding of where we're going to end up with June. But I will point out the unspent authorized budget worksheet. I feel pretty good about this document with our estimated expenditures, miscellaneous income, how we're going to end up with unspent authorized budget. So we're pretty much on target there. And then the next document is your activity fund report, and that is actually through June. And then the last document is our food service trend through the end of the school year, and I see it got cut off. I really apologize for that. So you have no idea really what the year-to-date balances are.
Is that an old finance person's trick? I bought a car like that once, so don't worry, it's in there.
So anyway, I believe when I was doing the numbers that we're still in very good shape with food service through the end of May. So that is the May financials report. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Tom?
Merci.
All right. I have a couple of announcements before we discuss adjourning, and the first one is July 16th. Online registration is scheduled to open, and we're all on. I'm looking at Scott Comstock, waiting for him to shake his head. Yes, we are all go. So, parents, if you've never experienced online registration, it's a beautiful thing. You can sit at home in your jammies on your couch, and you can get your children all registered for school, and it's great. And if you would rather go see the lovely staff at MCSD, that will certainly be an option as well. But the online option is really nice, and we've done it for several years now. So July 16th, mark your calendars if you want to hop online to register your students. And then our next regularly scheduled board meeting will be August 13th. We will be back here at City Hall and at 7 p.m.
And Madam President, I have just two quick, if I could, two quick community announcements. One, if you haven't had the chance to visit one of our education partners, which is the Muscatine Library, the new library, I really encourage you to go visit that. It is absolutely an amazing and amenity that's been added to our community, and I really want to thank H&I for what they've done to make that possible. And I know the library staff has been working like crazy, but it is a phenomenal facility, and I'm certainly looking forward to ways that we can become even more ingrained partners with them. And the other I would like to mention is that Mary Wildermuth, who has been with the Museum of History and Industry, is retiring at the end of this week, and it is also a great partner in our education program. And Mary, I just want you to know, every time we've had a visitor, we've brought them through, and every time they've been amazed and have really appreciated the story that you've been able to tell about Muscatine. And so, on behalf of not only the schools, but personally, I want to thank you for everything you've done to make that a real asset for our community.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That was awesome. All right, any other announcements? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I was afraid you were all going to leave me hanging. And second?
I'll second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Good job, Tom.
Oh, the motion carries. I guess I didn't say that.